Hi everyone, and welcome to today's VU Elevenses session on thinking a little bit more about alcohol. My name is Peter. I'm a lecturer in clinical psychology, and I really enjoy working with people who are trying to find their way out of a relationship with some kind of self-soothing type activity. We'll focus on alcohol today, but what we talk about is going to be equally applicable to things like food, screen time, Netflix binges, all of the things that we might have found ourselves doing a little bit more than we wanted to, particularly when we're at home and things are stressful. So, all of these things are things that we can form, to use psychologist speech, unhelpful attachments to, and things that we can use to take the edge off at the end of the day. And while it can be easy to think of it that way, and for some people that's all it might be, it's also easy for these things to creep into our lives a little bit too far and start taking things that are meaningful and important away from us. So, in terms of alcohol, let's start there and think about what's ideal. It can be difficult to know what the recommendations are. So here are the recommendations from the National Health and Medical Research Council from this year, and it's no more than 10 standard drinks per week and no more than 4 standard drinks on any one day. So if you think about having a glass of wine or two with dinner, if that's happening 7 days a week, just one glass of wine with dinner is getting us close to the standard drinks, and then 4 standard drinks on any one day might actually surprise you what that looks like. The reason I mention the glass of wine as an example, because it's a common example of what people think of as a standard drink. But let's get familiar on what a standard drink actually is. It might surprise you because it certainly surprised me in the past. A glass of, an average restaurant serving of white wine is actually 1.4 standard drinks. Red wine is 1.6 standard drinks. Champagne is around 1.4 standard drinks. Beer is around 1.4 standard drinks as well. So while it might be tempting to think of a glass of wine at dinner as pushing us close to that boundary, now that we've got this information, we can go back and think, well, actually, it's putting us over. So thinking about alcohol consumption in that way, we can start to realize that the recommendations are probably a little bit less than we realize. And we might want to think a little bit more closely about the way that we're using alcohol. So what's problematic? And this is usually the question on most people's mind. When do I actually have a problem? And really a big part of this question is up to you to answer. It's for you to decide when it's becoming problematic. But let me tell you what mental health workers look for so you can have them on your mind as well. Things to think about: intentions, tolerance, and time. So, how often do you end up drinking more than you had intended to when you first sat down? Do you think that you'll just have one gin and tonic and then find yourself, 20 minutes later back in the kitchen mixing up a cocktail and thinking, oh, that's not quite what I intended to do, but I really feel like I need it? Tolerance is the next one. So do you find that you need to drink more than you used to get the same effect? So if you had a glass of wine at the end of the day, are you finding that that's no longer having the same effect, taking the edge off, and you need more wine to get that same effect? And time. Are you spending a lot of time buying, drinking, or recovering from alcohol? And when we say a lot of time, that's a bit of a vague term, but really what we mean is more time than you want to. Time that you really would prefer to be spending doing other things, or have other people said, you know what, you're not able to do this for me, you're not here for me in the way I need you, because you're spending time drinking or spending time recovering from alcohol. So thinking about each of those 3 things can help you get an understanding of, is this becoming a problem? Is it time for me to rethink this? Now, what can I do? That's the next step that people are usually interested in. And some of these things are going to apply to the things that we mentioned at the beginning. If the thing that you're thinking about changing is not necessarily a glass of wine, but a pint of Ben and Jerry's, or watching 5 episodes of something on Netflix when you really only have time for one. These are things that should be able to help. Some of them will be applicable to most. So let's start with a very psychology-y term called stimulus control. It sounds really weird, but part of our behavior is not really within our conscious control. We like to come up with reasons after we do it, but sometimes when we see things, it initiates behaviors automatically. We just want to move towards something. And a great example of this sort of automatic behavior completion mechanism, as we call it, is if you've ever gone and checked the fridge, realized that what you want isn't there or there's nothing there, gone and sat down, and then 5 minutes later found yourself staring at the fridge again, even though you know full well that there's nothing in there. It's a great example of how your brain can kind of initiate these behaviors and push you to do things without much more information. So if we know this, we can take advantage of it, right? Thinking about when we come into contact with these things in our environment that prompt us to engage in these behaviors, just seeing that bottle of wine in the fridge sometimes can be enough to remind your brain, oh, that would be great right now. So removing things, getting rid of the alcohol that you have at home as much as possible. You might have a collection of alcohol that you enjoy or are proud of, but is it possible to move or remove that, even if it's just temporarily? Taking alcohol off the shopping list. What doesn't get bought doesn't get drunk, and this applies to all manner of things that we tend to like to put in our mouths. Alcohol, chocolate, chips, all of those sorts of things. You'll be surprised at just how effective it is and what a barrier it can be to just not have it at hand. Readjust can be difficult, and it's slightly easier now at COVID when we're trying to avoid the places where we'd normally buy or enjoy things like alcohol. But sometimes it might be just not walking past that pub that you normally go to, not walking past the Dan Murphy's that's on the corner, going to that next bus stop. It might sound really simple, but removing these stimuli can really help calm that part of your brain that's trying to get you to engage in these behaviors automatically. And it's not doing that because you're a bad person, it's doing that because that's the way it's learned to solve these problems and get rid of the discomfort. There's also some kind of COVID-specific things that are happening because a lot of us are working from home more. This article appeared a couple of months ago and I really liked it because the author talked about this daily ritual, this marker, the end of the workday. And some of us have started marking the end of the workday at home in ways like this by having a glass of wine at 5 o'clock. Now, if that's not causing you a problem, that's absolutely fine. But if it's something that you want to change, just knowing that this is an important thing for you, this ritual, can help you change the ritual. So you can do things like eat fruit, exercise, talk to someone, go to the movies, or even have a coffee, or even, sometimes cake. Sometimes these things that people offer to replace the ritual aren't really very appetizing or very enticing. Eating a piece of fruit really might just not do it for you. So in the short term, if things like alcohol have become a big problem for you, you might find you need something really rewarding and pleasurable to do. So while eating more cake might not be ideal in the short term, and I certainly don't, in the long term, and I don't advocate it as a long-term strategy, in the short term, if it helps you move away from something that's causing even more problems, like alcohol might be, that's absolutely fine. But the goal is to replace it with something that's pleasurable, that you enjoy, because what your brain's doing is trying to find a solution for discomfort. More discomfort by trying to force yourself to eat a raw carrot isn't going to work. So think about things, replacing that ritual with something that's enjoyable. I like to have a moments menu, or what I call a moments menu anyway. It's a selection of things because when you try this out, I can guarantee you your brain's going to give you all of these reasons why you should just go back to the old way of doing things. It's so much easier. I don't know what to do. I'm so tired. I can't be bothered. A great way to short circuit that is have a list of things that you can choose from. So you might want to finally read that book that you bought in 2012. You could watch a movie. There's lots of great online learning things that we can be doing at the moment. Museums and cities have virtual tours. Why don't you just send a chat and start a conversation with someone? Hop onto Meetup and see what virtual meetups are available if you can't be out and about where you are at the moment. Social video calls, as a surprise delight of the lockdown as far as I'm concerned. Planning what you're going to do post-COVID, trying to figure a recipe, play with your pet, painting, drawing, all sorts of things. You can do indoors and then outdoors. If we are allowed to visit cafes here in Victoria, that would be great. You might do some gardening. Group exercise was back when I prepared these slides. It's no longer. You never know, by the time you're listening to it, it might be back for you. Seeing what you can do in your neighborhood, hop on Google and find out what's available. There's lots of things. Personalize this and make it your own. Fill it with things that you know are going to be enjoyable for you. And then the last thing I want to talk about is talking to someone. You might want to talk to someone in your life who you think that perhaps they have a problem, first of all. You might be concerned about something that they're doing, the way they're using alcohol, food, all sorts of things. So I thought I'd give you a little checklist of how you might do that in a productive way. First of all, share your concerns with them. So tell them about what you're concerned about and how it's affecting you. Try not to say, well, you're doing something bad, but instead, when I notice you doing this, it makes me worry. Can I talk to you about it? Pick something specific. So, oh my God, your diet is just terrible at the moment. Unfortunately, no one's ever responded well to that kind of comment. But, can I talk to you about this? I noticed that you've been having a chocolate bar after dinner every night, and it's been a month. And I worry, can we talk about that? Listen to their point of view and try and understand rather than change, which is so difficult when so many of us go into these conversations with these kind of background expectations of changing the person, but really try and hear them out. Try and work out, what are they going through? Why have they started eating more or drinking more? What role is that playing for them? Can they see it changing in the short term, in the long term? And then see if you can collaborate. Try and find one thing that you can do together. Often we develop these kinds of coping strategies when we're feeling a little bit lost and alone. If someone comes to us, expresses their concern for us, listens to our point of view and goes, hey, how about we do this thing together? We feel less alone and things become a little bit more possible. Now you might want to talk to someone about your use as well. So here in Victoria, the direct line is available to everyone. That number's up on the screen there. The Self-Help Addiction Resource Centre is a great one if you're concerned about someone else. And between the conversation that you have with that person, you might want a gap where you talk to someone else about your concerns. So loved ones and family, if you're concerned, call the Self-Help Addiction Resource Centre. And then young people, there's a lot of focus on young people at the moment and how they're coping. So here in Victoria, we have the Youth Drug and Alcohol Advice Service, which is just for people who are concerned about young people or young people who are concerned about themselves or their friends. So I know that sometimes with these lines, we can hesitate to call them because it might be weird or we're bothering them or someone else might have greater need than we do. Having worked on this lines, let me just reassure you that this is you and the reason you're calling is why these people get up and go to work. We're sitting there waiting for you to call and we really want to talk to you. We want to hear about what's going on for you. So don't hesitate to pick up the phone. So hopefully that's given you some things, I was going to say some food for thought, but some things to think about in terms of drugs, alcohol, or other things that you might have found yourself doing a little bit more of in order to cope with the stresses at the moment. So take care, think about how you might want to replace your ritual. Think about putting a moments menu together, and you might like to start doing that today. And then if you want to talk to someone, think about doing it in the productive way that we discussed by sharing your thoughts, listening to them, and then collaborating. And if you need further help, don't hesitate to call one of those numbers.